Hi everyone, thanks for coming here today for our program. I'm Eli Struck, I'm a senior practicum student here at UWSP.
And I'm Brandon Wagner, and I'm also a senior practicum student here at UWSP.
So our program today is about rocky relationships with wildlife.
Yeah, and we want to look at how we're changing our behaviors to promote harmony with nature. So we're going to look at different things such as what a nuisance animal is, why do we call them nuisance animals, what's the history behind it, and then how we can prevent these types of human-wildlife conflicts.
Today we're going to be walking the Trail of Reflections Loop. It's going to be about a half mile, and we think our walk's going to be around 45 minutes. The trails are pretty icy today, so just be mindful of that when we're walking on icy parts of the trail. We're going to take our time. We're in no rush. Keep that in mind as we get going. Anything else you want to say, Brandon?
Yeah, before we head out, as we're walking, I just want to ask you guys to try to find a neighbor or a sibling, if you guys have them, and try to tell a story about a time you've had an interaction with wildlife. And then when we get to our first stop, we'll stop and try to share a couple stories. All right?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
With that, we're going to start walking.
We're going to go this way and then head down that.
Awesome.
Cool. Fastest stop along the trail. You can all stay on that side, so we're not blocking the entire path over here.
Yeah. We want to make sure everyone can see. All right. When we were walking over here, did anyone have any stories about wildlife recently or in their life?
Getting close to the deer.
Say that?
I don't know.
You got really close to a deer?
How close I forgot to the deer.
Yeah,
You got close to a deer?
Yeah. He said he got about 30 feet away from a deer. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that's pretty close for a deer. Anybody else have any wildlife interactions in the deer?
We've got a deer that's been hanging around the yard, and I think it's a late fawn that was orphaned over deer season, and it's just one single deer, and it keeps walking all over. It's amazing how many tracks a single deer can make.
Yeah, right. You think there's 50 of them, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our interactions with wildlife are really positive. We like looking at birds on our bird feeders. We like looking at the deer in our yard. But sometimes we can kind of bump heads with wildlife. And when we bump heads with wildlife, that's called a nuisance animal. Now, nuisance animals, they're not bad necessarily, but they can create problems in our life. They can damage our property, they can spread disease. I'm going to go over a few common nuisance animals that we have in Wisconsin right now. Somebody tell me what that is? Fox? Yeah. Red fox. One of our more charismatic nuisance animals, I would say. I'm never bummed out when I see a fox. But fox can live in very close proximity to humans. And this is because many nuisance animals are generalist species. They don't need specific types of habitat, they don't need specific food, they can kind of just live anywhere. And when you can live anywhere, you're going to live next to humans. So fox, they can really get into our garbage, they can mess with our livestock. Anybody have chickens here? You know someone with chickens? Yeah, foxes, big problem with people with chickens. They like to get in our garbage, and because they're also in the canine family, like dogs or wolves, our domestic dogs can get in fights with foxes, and they can even they mingle and they butt heads. Another very common a nuisance animal I'm going to say I'm less happy to see is the mouse. Mice. They're really fun when they're outside. They're food for things like owls, but when in their house, they can poop everywhere, which can spread disease.
The cats make a mess out of them.
The cats make a mess out of them? Do you have a cat?
Yeah, two.
Do they bring in mice sometimes?
They eat them. Well, they're inside cats, but they get them out of the walls and stuff, and they eat them.
So you're probably pretty happy to have that cat.
Yeah.
Mice, probably one of our more common nuisance animals we have here in Wisconsin, and they can be anywhere. Another really prevalent nuisance animal. This is one I would say most people like here in the great state of Wisconsin, but the white-tailed deer.
Yeah, they can be a nuisance.
Often, what's your question?
Why the deer?
Why the deer? A lot of people have gardens, and deer really like to get into our gardens and eat things.
Yeah, our grandma sprays stinky deer.
Stinky, so she's repelling the deer?
Yeah, and for the chipmunks.
For the chipmunks, deer and chipmunks. All right. So deer, they love to get in our gardens and they love to eat things. Another very common negative interaction we have with deer is traffic collisions. So managing those is pretty tricky. All right. This one's probably the more obvious nuisance animal we're going to talk about today is the raccoon. Raccoons, they really like to eat garbage. They really like to get into bird feeders. They like to mess with our domestic wildlife, like our livestock and our chickens. And because they're such good generalists, they're very prevalent. They live everywhere and they will find a way to prevail. And kind of one of our more cute nuisance animals. I like seeing them sometimes when they're not eating all my bird seed. Yeah, squirrels. Squirrels. Because they're also very good generalists, they really like to get into our attics, they like to eat a lot of the food we leave out for other animals, and they can really pester our birds on our bird feeders, which is a big bummer.
The cats talk to them through the window.
Ooh, your cat talks to them through the window?
Yeah, they say meow.
Did your cat ever get any of them?
They got chipmunks once.
Chipmunk
Then we
once.
left out pennies, and then we had squirrel pennies. And
Squirrel
the
pennies.
chipmunk gunk on them. When we first moved into the house, the cats got a chipmunk in the sunroom.
Wow, well, it sounds like your cats are doing a lot of work.
They really do.
Oh, okay.
And trucks
Yeah.
in the basement. Well, the truck's
Yeah,
in
they
the
were
basement
teens.
this summer.
Yeah.
One truck.
Well, so just to kind of recap, nuisance animals, they're not bad. It's how we choose to interact with them. They're trying to do what they've done throughout their whole history as animals, and that's why we butt heads with them. As we walk to our next station, I kind of have a fun activity for some of the kiddos here. Schmeekly, we're known for having a lot of pretty cool animals, right, Brandon?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like us, animals go to the bathroom and they leave poop on the snow. But we can learn a lot about animals by looking at their poop. Like, you can learn what they're eating, what type of animal they are, even their health. So I got some fun little diagrams of tracks, animal poop. And as we're walking to our next, no, this isn't real. It's kind of like rubber, you know, like a little bouncy ball or a sticky hand. I got one more, one of you can hold on to. As we're going to our next station, feel free to look for those animal tracks and that animal scat. And if you see something really cool, let me or Brandon know. We're going to stop and look at it.
Yeah. And we'll show everybody talk about what it is.
Yeah. It's a little dark, so pardon me for that, but this tree right here, and you follow it all the way up, you kind of see a big clump of leaves up there. This is a really good example of what animals do when they have ample space and they're not butting heads with humans. Oh, did you see one?
Yeah, there he goes.
Back there, I think you heard us.
He's waiting. He's like, get out of my home. I want to go to bed. But this is a really good example of what animals do when they have ample room and they're not butting heads with us. The squirrel is able to make a nice natural home, and that's made out of things like leaves and bits of other grasses that he finds. It makes a really warm home. If this tree wasn't around, do we have any idea what the squirrel might be doing instead? If it was just a bunch of houses? So,
I have an idea. It'd
Yeah.
be in my attic. That's where
it'd
it'd
be in your attic?
Yes.
Yeah, it'd probably be in your attic because your attic, it's warm and it mimics natural habitat that the squirrel would use, trying to find that bedding in that hollow. So just a cool little thing I thought I would show you, but we're gonna keep walking for a little bit more.
Alright, so right here I wanted to talk about what we've done and how things have changed over history that have caused these rocky relationships with our wildlife, how our conflicts have been different. So right now what I have is a comparison of land that started as a non-developed area. Sorry, it's a little dark. Yeah, thank you, sorry. It started a little dark and it actually developed over time. And you can see how much little forests that have landed just in 16 years, right? Animals out of their homes. Exactly. Our home. One of the main reasons for human wildlife conflict is actually our distance to wildlife. When people are living in the cities, there's not as much room for wildlife to live. Unfortunately, we do like space for wildlife to live. But as we move out to rural areas, which is kind of like these neighborhoods where we're surrounded by forests and we have access to trees and open fields, then we run into the problem of living closer to wildlife. And that is what brings in a lot of our conflicts with wildlife. So as we were talking about earlier with deer really like to get into our gardens. They like to pick our flowers. For those of you that are gardeners, my grandparents were really big gardeners, and they hated every single spring when the deer would bite off all their bud tips, and then there would be no more flowers. And like we mentioned a little bit earlier, unfortunately our roads are a big cause of that, and we don't have a lot of ways around or avoiding deer accidents besides managing the population at the moment. There are strategies that people are trying, actually, like laying the bridges to make crossing highways safer for animals and people alike. Because when we hit a deer, it also hurts us and our car and everything else. So it's dangerous for everybody involved. And then we mentioned squirrels earlier too, which can be kind of a nuisance when they get into your home. They like to chew up all your insulation, make a nest out of it, and then it also carries the problem of having feces and diseases in your. So we want to try to avoid that. And squirrels, they do live everywhere. They're very good generalists. You'll find them actually on all seven inhabited continents, I should say. And they like to live everywhere. So they'll get into your houses if they can find warmth. If it's cold outside, they'll go into your house for warmth, or if you have food laying around, we'll try to go for that. We also have raccoons, which we talked about earlier, but I'm not sure if we mentioned how dangerous they can really be. Because if a raccoon gets in our house, raccoons are known for carrying a lot of diseases, including rabies. So raccoons can hurt us and our pets, even if pets get rabies, it's not good. So when they get in our houses, sometimes they have young, sometimes during spring denning season when they need to stay warm over the winter, they find a way into your attic or even underneath your crawl spaces or underneath your porch or something, and then go in there, and then on the off chance that one of them might pass away while they're under your porch, cause your house to smell and cause more diseases for your family and your pets, especially if they eat it. Alright, so just going back over it, we talked about how human-wildlife conflicts is arising from living closer and closer to wildlife. Right now, around 50% of humans are actually in a ruralized area, and the number is just growing and growing steadily. So we're ever more pushing into forested areas and wildlife homes. Now, before we move on to our next stop, I actually want to have everybody look at the pond really quick. See how pretty it is? It's really cool. That pond wasn't always there. We actually made it. So when we do things like this, we create habitat for wildlife, for different kinds of wildlife. We have different kinds of birds that might come here to visit the pond. We have different kinds of wildlife that might come to visit the pond. And that's just increasing our chances for human wildlife. What?
Are there fish in it?
I think there are actually a couple smaller types of fish in this one, like shiners and something. I don't think there's a whole lot of big fish in this pond. But we don't run into a whole lot of conflicts with fish. They tend to stay in the water.
Unless they're flying.
Unless they're flying fish or carp, not great. But yes, when we create places like this, especially around our neighborhoods that we tend to make a rain well, so our neighborhood doesn't flood. They attract a lot of wildlife, and then when we see wildlife and have problems with them, we think it's their fault, but really we're the one who made that habitat for them after taking away different habitat. So we can stop and think about it. So now before we walk to our next site, can you guys, on the way there, try to think about a way we can prevent human-wildlife conflicts? Yeah? Awesome. All right, we're going to head on this way. Watch yourself. What other ways can you do to prevent, let's say, how can you prevent your raccoon from, a raccoon from eating your trash? Put a hose so you booby trap it? I like that. That would scare them away. That would prevent them from coming back. That's pretty smart. What about you guys? Any other way? How would you stop a raccoon from getting your trash? Alright, let's walk this way.
I'm going to come this way just a little bit more.
To where the light.
Well, welcome to our last stop. At this stop, we're going to talk about prevention and deterrence. Prevention is the best way we have to manage our conflicts with wildlife, and even though this just looks like the front of the nature center, there's some things that we're actually passively doing to manage our conflicts with wildlife. So to get deer out of your garden, this is something we've done here. We put up this wire fencing here. This is so deer, they're not going to browse our young plants here. Also, if you notice in the back, a lot of the bird feeders, like this one right there, it's a thin metal pole. That way squirrels and raccoons can't climb up it. Another big thing we do with prevention is we deter. So you talked about earlier, your grandma, she sprays for deer and chipmunks, was it? Yeah. So we often will spray things just to keep the animals away from certain sources of food. Here I actually have a really good homemade prevention method. If you have like raccoons in your attic, if you have mice in your wall, if you have animals get into your house, these are cotton balls that are soaked with eucalyptus oil. If you want to give it, do you want to give it some? Yeah, give it from here. Really strong. You like to give it? Anybody over here?
If I'm a rat, if I smell this, I'm gonna wish.
Yeah. So because animals have such a largely developed sense of smell, something to this like them, it really irritates them. And if you leave these cotton balls around areas that they're getting into, like let's say you have raccoons get into your garbage can, you put these cotton balls on there, they're gonna get super agitated by the eucalyptus oil, and they're gonna leave it alone. Another thing we often do is if you just go to your local garden store, they have sprays to keep deer off your food. Those are really good also. But if you're looking for more of a homemade method to deter animals from your bird feeder, let's say, a common method is putting black pepper in with your bird seed. This is because birds don't have taste buds. However, squirrels, chipmunks, mice, raccoons, they got taste buds, and they're really not gonna like that dose of black pepper. Also, red pepper flakes work too. If anyone would like, if anyone would like some of these cotton balls with eucalyptus oil, I have some I can pass out if anyone's interested. So you can try them at home. You say you wanted one?
We have it at home.
You have it at home. Okay, even better. Anybody have a clue what this little aluminum box is? A mouse trap. You are correct. This specific style is called a Sherman trap, but is it a little different from regular traps we see?
Yeah.
It's a live trap. Exactly. You have live, are they like the big wire ones?
Flatter for mice. Like this big.
Yeah.
Flat. And then they have a clear panel so you can see through them.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. Well, so part of our deter is removed. If we have mice in our house, chipmunks, squirrels, this is for smaller animals. I don't think a raccoon could fit in here. This is really little. We can remove animals from our home. As Brandon's going to touch on, we really don't want to condition animals to come for us to look for things. If we're feeding raccoons pretty consistently, they're going to come back and seek that from us. If we're leaving corn out for deer, they're going to come back and expect that. Really just keep in mind, we're going to try to deter these animals and not give them an opportunity to get into our homes. We're going to seal up holes. We're going to not feed them, and we're not going to create habitat near us that will entice them to be in close proximity to us.
Yeah, and then one more thing on the outdoors that we want to talk about before we head inside in our conversation, not physically, is these bird feeders. They do a really good job here at a nature center where you can actually see all the wildlife and move outside. They do a really good job bringing wildlife closer, especially to the viewing room right there, the bird viewing room we have. So our visitors can see at our homes and different places. Bird feeders are everything feeders, so they're not just feeding birds. So we get things like raccoons and bears, especially bears. If you have a bear near your property, they're going to destroy your bird feeder and you're not going to have it ever again. It's going to be just crushed, they're going to eat all of it. So we want to be careful where we're placing our bird feeders, how we're placing them, and what type of bird feeder it is. Like we have squirrel-proof ones and things like that. Now when we head inside, we want to make sure that before we even do anything with any wildlife we might have in our homes, we are protecting ourselves. So wearing PPE, personal protective equipment. So if you're ever going to handle a mouse in a trap or a dead animal you might find, you want to make sure you have gloves on, mask if necessary. Typically if they're alive and you're doing a nest, it would probably be best to do it just because you're stirring up a lot of things. But we have things like live traps, and unfortunately a lot of our traps inside tend to be things like a mouse trap that slaps shut and that trying to think of the word, euthanizes the animal. Along with glue traps, sometimes they do that too. So we really want to try to focus on our prevention methods that we just talked about, so we can make the world a better place for those animals and ourselves. And then when we do run into problems with wildlife inside, sometimes you're not going to be able to take care of the problem yourself, and that is okay. So that happens. Wildlife, yeah, when you have one mouse, you probably have a bunch of mice. If you have one rat, you have a lot of rats. So if there's ever a problem, you guys, I've made a list of animal control places. There are 3 local companies, and one is a fairly larger company. And then I will mention that I put the DNR on this page. I did put the DNR on this page. The DNR isn't really a place. I can take it back there. Okay. All right. For the DNR, you would want to call that for like a bear problem or a beaver problem if you have one. They typically deal with bigger problems, bigger situations than the little animals. But if you wanted to call them and just say like you had a more rare animal in your house that's just not as common, you call them and let them know. They'd be pretty interested. But for the most part, you're going to want to call regular extermination. Yeah.
I have a way to keep squirrels out of your bird feeders.
Yeah. How?
The hanger things that you hang your bird feeders on.
Uh-huh.
You put slinkies on them.
You put slinkies on them? Oh, that's pretty cool. I haven't heard that before.
That's what our grandpa does, but it's just the squirrels got smart, so all they do is just pull it down so it won't pull anymore. And that's a ladder.
Interesting.
I bet that was pretty cool.
So I used to jump and they just pulled it down and they'd run away.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, now they're smart and they just pull it down and use that as a ladder.
Awesome. We're going to walk just up closer to the porch or closer to the building and do our quick little conclusion before we have to say goodbye. All right. Welcome, guys. We've made it to the end of our walk. Thank you again for everybody who participated, and you all did, so thank you to everybody. I know it was a little bit cold, and it's our first night, so thank you again. We wanted to go over just what we learned a little bit quickly today. We went over how we can change our behaviors to improve our relationships and promote harmony with wildlife. And we talked about what a nuisance animal is, why they became nuisance animals, what kind of situations led to that, and then we talked about how we can prevent human-wildlife interactions. Mm-hmm. Now, can anybody tell me what animals might be considered a nuisance animal? A fox, that's one. Can we get another one? Raccoon. Mouse, deer. Yeah.
And
bats?
the rabbit
we talk
that
about bats,
just,
but they can be.
They could
the
be.
rabbit that just ran through here.
I did see that. Rabbits can be. They can also chew up flowers. Yeah.
Get in your gardens.
Yeah. Yeah.
They get in the gardens a lot.
Deer, squirrels.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some of the more
Yeah.
common ones.
Yeah. That's pretty great. Can anybody tell us the main reason why we have a heightened state of human-wildlife conflict? There was one big reason we talked about at the beginning. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, we're getting closer and closer to wildlife, and we're moving into their homes. So we're causing a butting of heads and getting really close to it. You're paying attention. Good job. All right, and then our final one. Can anybody tell me what things they might change in their life to prevent human-wildlife conflicts? What kind of changes you can make, or you might make?
Patching the hole in their roof.
Patching a hole in your roof? Yeah, that might help keep the animals out.
Trapping them and rehoming them.
Trapping and rehoming? That's a great idea. And you can rehome them where there's a huge open prairie. If you're going to do it on private land, that's a lot of land you might want to ask for.
Yeah. Sweet thoughts. I have an idea how I'm going to get rid of some conflict in my life. I'm going to deter.
You're going to deter?
I'm going to deter. I'm going to put these in my cabinet, and hopefully the mice don't get in there.
That'd be pretty nice. I know you like your food untouched by these.
I really do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you everybody for coming to our public program. We're really happy to have everyone despite the cold and the really icy trails. Coming up, we have more public programs at Schmeekly if you're interested to check those out. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming. If you have any questions, Brandon and I are going to be around here for a few extra minutes if you want to talk. But other than that, have a good day and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.